家好，我是杨晨尧。那来自国立中心大学兽医病理生物学研究所。今天呢很荣幸受到李金龙李总经理的邀请，来到这里呢当第一位的引言人。那中午的时间嘛，大家赶到。那首先呢，我想先用一个好消息来当开头。现在是4月嘛，4月还没过。那各位还记得4月6号发生什么事情吗？4月6号，世界动物卫生组织再次的认可台湾非洲猪瘟的清净的成就。所以呢，从4月6号开始，我们再次成为非洲猪瘟、传统猪瘟以及口蹄疫的3大猪病非疫国。那这是呢，我们所有在场的朋友，还有呢，我们的动物药品的同业，还有呢，官方大家一起努力的成果。那这个呢，是一个非常重要的成就。亚洲只有一个国家，就是台湾，全世界能够达到这样的也非常的少。所以呢，这是我们大家共同的成就。我们这给自己一个鼓掌，一个掌声，好吗？那接下来呢，这些大麻烦已经清除了。那接下来呢，有大魔王，我们也要把它清除。我们现在猪场里面的大魔王就是 PRRS。那这个病呢，从1989年发现到现在，一直都没有办法好好的处理，到现在还是困扰着我们的牧场。所以呢，必须要有各种更新的、更好的、大家共同的一些解决方案，一起来解决。今天很高兴呢，我们作文公司呢已经请到了这么优秀的国外的讲者。那今天第一位呢，这位讲者呢非常特别，他来自委内瑞拉。对这个国家名字有没有很熟？总统刚刚被抓走的那一个委内瑞拉但是不是他被抓走了他是来自于委内瑞拉的兽医学中央大学兽医学院毕业。然后呢，随后到美国明尼苏达州取得流行传染病学的兽医博士，所以他兼通猪病，也兼通传染病学，甚至他还自己呢到了美国的伊诺大学去进修了所谓的高阶兽医管理经营的训练。那我们这个讲者呢，这个 Dr. John Paul Cano， 他呢不止呢在这样学术的能力之外，他还在他是学界跟业界都专精的一个专家。他曾经也是回到他的国家委内瑞拉中央兽医学院担任副教授，担任猪病的老师应该讲经济动物的老师8年。然后呢，他接下来的工作就跟我们业界比较有关了。他曾经到美国的100家公司工作，接下来呢到美国的 PIC 种猪公司担任了猪病的技术总监。随后呢到哪里？各位看到了吗？到美国的 Paxton 各位都知道是一个什么样的公司，他是他们的合伙人。我想这种的能力应该是有足够的业力经验，才有办法被聘为合伙人，而且呢是拉丁美洲这个部分的管理总监。那现在呢，他在西班牙这边，他有他自己的公司，所以呢，待会他会用他这些在国际间的经验，跟大家来介绍关于 PRRS 这个疾病，在全球，他待过南美洲，待过北美洲，现在他在欧洲，在西班牙，他这些地方所得到的一些经验，还有告诉大家，就他的理解，为什么 PRRS 这么难控制，给大家呢做一个整体的一个观念，做一个全球性的一个 overview。那最后呢，接下来我们以热烈的掌声来欢迎 Dr. John Paul Cano。Let's welcome Dr. John Paul Cano。
那也提醒在场的各位贵宾，将耳机转到频道1来收听中文的翻译。谢谢大家。
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank you all for taking the time to come and visit us and share with us this afternoon. We really appreciate your time. And I would like to thank Soeres for the invitation to come and visit your beautiful country and powerful swine industry. This is a nice region. I'm glad that we have people from 4 different countries joining us today, so it's a pleasure. I would like to start today by saying that we're going to share some of the ideas, things that we do in the field that are not necessarily the solution for all the problems, but have been experiences or mistakes that we have made, that we don't have any problem to share with you and hopefully help a little bit with your farms. First thing is that we all should be very proud because no matter where we work in the world, we are working with one big objective, which is feeding the families of the world. So no matter where you work in the swine industry, we all have a very important role in society. So I'm very proud of that, and I'm sure that you are too. The good news is that pork will continue to be one of the most consumed proteins in the world. We are now fighting with poultry, with chicken, to see which one will be the most consumed. But in all countries of different incomes, they will still continue to increase the consumption of pork in the next years. That means that our industry has the responsibility and the opportunity to continue to grow and produce more. But that increase in production is not free. We need to continue to produce at a very low price because consumers want to take a look at price before they buy the product. We need to produce at a very high standard of safety and with no errors, no problems for consumers. We can continue to eat pork in a very comfortable way. And as you can see, society is putting a lot of pressure on us from an animal welfare, antibiotic use, environmental impact perspective. That means that we need to produce cheaper, better, but with higher standards every day. And that means that we need to help the producers to do it in a sustained basis in their farms. And lastly, pretty much everywhere in the world, we are dealing with a lack of labor. Every day is more difficult to find enough people to work in the farms and do a good job there. So we need to produce cheaper pork, safer, with higher standard, with less people. So we have to be very smart on how to do that. I have the luck to work around the world and share with companies that are very successful in all the continents. And I've seen 4 factors that are very special about those successful companies. The first one is that they are driven by cost. So they produce at a very competitive cost, and they offer their pork to customers at a very competitive cost. The second one is that they produce following those standards of quality, very high quality in terms of their pork. And the third one is that they produce that high quality pork very consistently. They produce the same number of pigs of the same size with the same quality every week. And lastly, they also have a good access to their domestic market in the countries that they operate, and they also have the opportunity to sell some pork to their neighbors or other countries. If you look at those 4 factors, they are all related to one thing, is animal health. I think that we can all agree that if you have healthier pigs, you can produce at a lower cost, you can produce with higher quality, you can produce with more consistency, and of course, you can access markets. So that puts us in a situation where we have a big responsibility to our clients, to the producers, but also in a good situation because we have a chair in the discussion table that happens strategically in those companies. This graph here is the margin, the profit of U.S. pork producers in the last year. This is a public database from the Iowa State University. And as you can tell, there are years of margin, positive margin, so they make money, somewhere between $10 and $40, some years are even better. And sometimes they lose money. They lose between 10 and $40. So this is a very variable industry. I can share with you guys, I worked for almost 20 years in the US, and now I have been working mainly in Spain in the last 3 years. And in Spain, the third largest pork producer in the world, something similar happens. You can see how from 2006 to 2020, production cost, the red line, moved around €1 and 1.2 euros per kilo. Production cost last year. And price, in the blue line, moved about that same range with the opportunity to make some money. So in those years, Spanish producers make about 11 cents of an euro per kilo. After the introduction of high pathogenic PRRS and the Ukrainian war, production cost increased a lot. And price increased a lot because we didn't have enough pigs. So packing plants or slaughterhouses increased their price. So we saw a huge increase in price. And they enjoy huge margins for 2.5 years. Last November, Spain reported a case of African swine fever in wild boars. And that took the price down very low to €1. Now we are about 1.27 cents of an euro per kilo. But production cost is still 1.36 per kilo. That means that Spanish producers are losing money. The point that I want to make with this slide and the previous slide in the US is that many times, or most of the times, there is more variation in our own farms, in our own companies, than in the market. We have farms that one specific farm loses €10, €20, and one farm makes €10, €20 with the same price. So we can't control the market, but we can control what we do in the farm and how to produce more efficiently. Okay. One of the main factors that determine competitiveness and cost, production cost, is health, as we said. And one of the main groups of diseases that cause that impact is respiratory diseases. You can see here all the infectious agents that cause disease, and also some of the environmental factors that cause that disease, like mycotoxins, environment gases, etc. We will talk today about PRRS, and we'll talk about other agents, and we can talk about other agents like APP or mycoplasma that we call epidemic agents. We should not have those agents in our multipliers. But then we have other agents that we call endemic agents that are present even in healthy pigs. Usually, if we had a PRRS case or PCV2 case, it will be very simple. But the problem is that we have complicated cases. We have cases where we have one virus or two viruses, one virus and one bacteria. So we need to make diagnostics to understand what we have. But what we all agree is that PRRS virus is a primary cause of infection, primary agent causing disease that triggers other agents. So if we control PRRS virus, for example, we'll be better off in our respiratory health for the pigs that we manage. As you know, in the US, they have been battling with this disease for more than 30 years, and it costs the pork producers $1,200 million a year, so $1.2 billion every year. And if you look at the history of PRRS, in the upper chart, we have incidents. So every year, they monitor how many farms get infected with no PRRS virus, and we have somewhere between 20 and 35% of the farms have a no PRRS break every year. In the other table below, in the other chart, we have the prevalence. How many farms are negative in green, and how many farms are positive in red or yellow. And you can see how about 50% of the industry is negative for PRRS, and 50% is still positive for PRRS. So you could tell probably we haven't learned too much, or we haven't made too much progress, and that's true. The situation is critical, and still we don't have final solutions. But we have learned a lot about biosecurity, about diagnostics, about immunization that we can apply not only for PRRS but for other diseases. In Spain, the situation was different. In Europe, most of the countries, we have PRRS type 1 that is milder than PRRS type 2, American PRRS virus. So you can see how from 2000s to 2020, we had viruses or PRRS virus that were pretty stable. So the average mortality in the nursery, 3 to 10 weeks of age, was about 3%, with the best companies at 1.5% and the worst companies at 4.5%. And it was increasing slowly because antibiotic restrictions, mainly. But then you can see how in 2020, when high pathogenic PRRS, the ones similar to the ones that you have in Asia or we have in North America, entered the country from Italy, then we saw an increase in nursery mortality, significant increase. And now we are about the average of 7.5%, with the worst farms at 11.5% and the best farms at 3.5%. You can see the increase, but another aspect of this graph that is very interesting is that we used to be about 3% difference between the best farms and the worst farms. And today, we are about 8% difference between the best farms and the worst farms. What we have seen in other industries is that when you have more health challenges, the good companies have a bigger difference to the bad farms or bad companies, and that continues to expand. That means that the competition is not now equal. Farms with more health problems will have lower performance, higher production costs. And we see that every time that we have high pathogenic PRRS. Today we want to share with you 4 aspects that we consider that are important and why PRRS is so challenging to manage. The first one is that PRRS stays in a pig population for a very long time. It is very persistent, but at the same time, it is not very contagious. So if one pig is infected, you would expect that if one sow gets infected, if one sow gets infected in a population, then you will be able to see that transmission very quick. Apologize, I clicked something here. But what actually happens with PRRS is that transmission is very slow. See, there you go. So a farm gets infected, but as the PRRS keeps moving to the barn, some animals don't get infected, and you have what we call negative subpopulations of animals, or pockets of negative animals. And that is very important because then the virus has always a place to replicate. You always have new wood to the fire, and that keeps the infection going. In viruses like influenza or PD, all the animals get infected about the same time, in a couple of weeks. And that means that the disease, most of the time, will be limited by itself and will extinguish. With PRRS, because not all the animals get infected, that prolongs the shedding in a farm, and that makes it very difficult to control. So that's the first concept that Dr. Scott B. replicated like 30 years ago. The second one is that this virus changes a lot. It is the nature of the virus to evolve and change, to escape the immune system. It's trying to hide and escape from the immune system, so it changes a lot. So if you remember the genome of the virus, we have the ORF1 that we call the engine, the motor of the virus to create more replicates and to do more new viruses. And then we have the surface glycoproteins that are just proteins that are in the surface of the virus interacting with the host cells. And those are the ones that change more. For example, we do most of the sequencing on ORF5. It's a glycoprotein in the surface that is like a mask for the virus. And the virus uses that mask to escape the immune system, and it changes a lot. That protein is very small. It is only 3% of the genome of the virus. And that's what we use to do epidemiology and to compare one strain to the other. The virus has two ways of changing and evolving over time. One is mutation. One nucleotide gets changed for another nucleotide. So that is a slow, constant change. The other factor is recombination. The virus can not only change slowly, but when they get mixed with other viruses, can take a piece of that virus and change faster. That is natural and normal for PRRS virus. That happens in nature every day in every pig. Imagine the number of cells that a pig has, how many cells can get infected, the number of pigs that we have. So the probability of change in one farm is huge. Every time that we have a new outbreak, every time that we have PRRS, the virus will be continuing to replicate, to change, and evolve. So one of the things that I would like you to remember to go home is that replication means change, means amplification, means clinical signs. We don't want replication. So everything we can do to minimize virus replication will help to control PRRS on the short term and in the long term. This is an example of what we have created after many years with PRRS, right? In Europe, or PRRS type 1, we started with one lineage, very mild, didn't cause too much disease, didn't transmit too much, didn't extend too much in the herds. But it was evolving slowly to lineage 2, and now we have the new lineages 3 that are more pathogenic, that gets transmitted very easy, stand for a long time in populations. In America or in Asia, we have about 11 lineages of virus and different classes that are distributed in the world. Remember, we do all this based on ORF5, 3% of the genome. This classification is very good for us to understand, where did my virus come from? Was it the same virus that I had? Is it my neighbor's virus? Is it the virus that comes with the vaccine? Is it the same virus that is replicated in my farm? Where did it come from? That's what we use it for. Or to explore, study the evolution of the virus. But this doesn't have anything to do with cross-protection. So nobody has been able to understand what cross-protection means or how to measure in a genome of the virus if this virus immunity will protect another virus. So keep that in mind. ORF5 is good for epidemiology and investigations, but it doesn't help to prevent or to predict cross-protection. The third factor we mentioned, long persistency, but very low, long persistency and very low contagious agents, so it creates negatives in populations. Second, that the virus will get transmitted very often. And third factor is that this virus uses multiple routes of transmission. Some diseases like swine dysentery uses only oral fecal way of transmission. Other diseases only use mosquitoes or flies. This virus is able to take all the potential ways of transmission pretty much and transmit to a new farm. So if you think about your farm, in the center, we have what we call area spread. My neighbors can infect my farm because of aerosol, dogs, mosquitoes, flies, people, dogs, birds, anything that is close to my farm can be a risk. And that's why location is the most important predictor of PRRS infection in a new farm, because the regional, the local transmission is very important. After that, we know that people can get contaminated in farms, so if we don't have good biosecurity, they will infect my farm. Contaminated trucks that come to pick the pigs or the sows from my farm, the feed trucks, or now they're talking about the feed itself, could be a risk factor. all the equipment that we use to remove mortality from the farms, the supplies, the materials that I enter in my farm, semen and gills, manure equipment that I use to remove the manure from the farm. All those, if they get contaminated, could be a risk factor, and PRRS uses all of them. And the last one is that this virus is very difficult to manage because it is immunosuppressive. PRRS virus kills like 80% of the alveolar macrophages in a couple hours, very quick. In 24 hours, the pig doesn't have alveolar macrophages. And alveolar macrophages are like vacuum machines that are cleaning the respiratory tract and avoiding the colonization of bacteria. So if the pig loses the alveolar macrophages, because the virus replicates in that cell, the cells explode, then they don't have any defense for Mycoplasma pneumoniae, or for APP, or strep suis, or Pastorella. So those bacteria that should be under control, when PRRS virus destroys those cells, those bacteria colonize the respiratory epithelium and cause disease. So keep that in mind. And that's why when we have PRRS, our people in the farm reports that we are seeing more meningitis for strep suis, or we are seeing more cough in pigs with Mycoplasma pneumoniae, or we are seeing more mortality in the finish for APP, etc. PRRS is immunosuppressive and helps other diseases to kill our pigs. So those were the bad news. Sorry that I started with the bad news, right? PRRS is complicated because for those 4 reasons. Now I want to share some good news. I had the chance, the honor to work in a company called Pipestone. Pipestone has about 340,000 sows in the US. And in 2009, the owners of Pipestone said that we have to do something because about 50% of the sow farms of the company will have a new PRRS break every year. And that's unsustainable with the business. So you can see here that it took a long time. It wasn't from one day to the next. But after a while, Pipestone has managed to have between 7 and 10%, including the last 2 years that I'm not showing here, 7 and 10% of new PRRS breaks every year, instead of 50. What they did, I think is interesting. The first thing is that we increase the biosecurity and the diagnostics in boars, in semen, or boars that produce semen, and in the multipliers that produce gills for our farms. So today, 99% of the cases, semen and gill introduction is not a risk factor for our farms. We can rule it out very easily. It used to be a very important role for transmission, but now semen and gills are not a big factor. The second one is that farms that were located in very bad areas, we thought about changing them to finishers or doing something with them because they will have a PRRS break every 6 months. So we took the opportunity over years, it wasn't in 1 year, in 8, 6, or 10 years, to move those sows to a better place and to allocate that farm to be a finisher farm, for example, and have that farmer to invest money in another farm in a better location. Or if we couldn't do that, especially in newer farms, we try to filter the air that was coming to those farms to minimize the risk in high-dense regions. The third thing and fourth that we did was developing a biosecurity program and trying to minimize the frequency of new breaks. And we then started doing training to everybody working in the farms and truck drivers and everybody. And then we started doing audits, checking that people were doing in the farms what we thought that they were doing. Number 5, especially after PD in 2013, Pipestone made a huge investment in truck washes and in new trucks to minimize the risk of transmission by trucks. The number 6, the bosses took executive decision and saying strategic decision and saying we are not going to coexist with PRRS virus at some point. It might not be in 1 year, but at some point in the next 5 years, we need to stabilize PRRS from this farm, doing a herd closure or a depopulation depending on the case. but we can't coexist with PRRS virus because it's too bad of an enemy to live with. And the last one was the strategic use of vaccination. Even that we reduced the number of farms, sow farms, that were positive for PRRS, the decision was to vaccinate 95% of the pigs that we raised to minimize the clinical impact on those pigs. So even today, I would say, 95% of the pigs get vaccinated and about 60-70% of the sows get vaccinated for PRRS as a way to increase immunity and minimize shedding of the virus. Let's summarize that. First thing that we need to do for PRRS is to reduce the number of outbreaks, and that is biosecurity. And it is possible. It sounds very difficult, but it is possible. Number two, we need to stabilize the sow farms. We need to reduce the virus that is coming to our pigs. And number three, we need to maximize immunity. We can do that with vaccine and minimize shedding. And we have to do all in all out, for example, to reduce that or to cause that effect. Let's take a look at those things. A biosecurity program has 4 components. The standard is how you guys want to do things in the farm. Then we train everybody to do that. Then we do audits. And the last thing is infrastructure. Even if you don't have money to invest in infrastructure, if you change your protocols, you train your people, and you do audits, then you will increase your biosecurity. And the good news is that biosecurity is good for other diseases. So diseases like APP or swine dysentery or other agents, classical swine fever, they do not get transmitted that easily as PRRS. So if you do basic biosecurity, you can stop those diseases. Let's skip this one. Location. We said location is very important. Because farms that are too close to each other will share the risk and will likely have a break. And I understand that sometimes it's very difficult to relocate a farm because this is the farm that you have, so you have to work with that. So you can do 2 things. One, we'll see in a minute, is air filtration, or 2 is do everything you can in biosecurity to minimize the risk from your neighbors. Let's take a look at that. This is a study that we did in 2012. We found 24 farmers that were decided to filter their farm. And they were located in very high dense locations, areas. And then we said day 0 is the day that they started filtrating. And we had the information from the 40 or 24 months before filtering the farm and 40 or 24 months after filtering the farm. Every black diamond is a new PRRS rate. So you can see here how they have reduced 8 times, to be exact, the number of PRRS rates in their farms. We also learned there that the air filters are only good for air. So if you make mistakes with basic biosecurity, farms will get infected. So this is an example on you can reduce the risk of infection, but for many farms, filtration is not an option. So what we thought we started doing was, well, if the filters are only good for filtration, but reduction in risk is 8 times, what else are we doing in those filter farms that helps? So one of the things is the definition of clean, dirty line. In the old concept, everything that is inside the perimeter fence, we consider clean. And everything outside, we consider dirty. In the new concept, what we are proposing is that everything that is inside the barns, the hallways, the showers, the office, every space where the pigs or the people working in the farm move is clean. And everything outside is gray or dirty, and I don't want to come back from yellow to green without a disinfection. And that is way easier to explain to people working in the farm. You can mark only 5 points where you have to cross that line. The first one is the showers, your disinfection room, the window or the UV light chamber where you enter your materials, the point where you take mortalities out, and the point where you load your pigs. The concept is that if you are going to enter the clean area, you have to either change fluids, shower in, or if I take a material, a car for mortality, or pigs go outdoor, they do not come back without proper disinfection. And that reduces the number of breaks very significantly. So you have everything that a filter farm is doing without the filter. That will help to reduce not only PRRS, but other diseases. The second point is about stabilizing the softwares. So the concept, that the objective that we're looking for here is to wean PCR negative pigs as many weeks of the year as possible. For that, you have to define your farm, what is the risk of that farm of having a PRRS break, and that will determine how you manage the disease. Let's just go back to this concept. If a pig gets infected with PRRS, the viremia will last 2 to 5 weeks, a little bit longer in younger animals. And seroconversion will happen about 2 weeks after the infection. And there is a period where, important, the pig is PCR negative in serum, but they will still have virus in the tonsils and lymph nodes, so they will be able to infect other pigs. So don't forget that number is about 60 to 100 days, the duration of shedding in some animals. And then there's another period where the pigs will have the virus in their tonsils, but the virus is captured and is not able to infect other pigs. So you can find it, but it's not infectious. Diagnostics. We can use serum PCR to evaluate the viremia. We do ELISA to evaluate the seroconversion. We can do ropes, for example, or fluid testing to monitor shedding. And if we need to know if they have some tissues, PCR or PRRS virus in the tissues, then we can do take samples of tissues and do PCR, right? I would like to share with you this table because it helps to classify my farms and decide what I'm going to do. The first one is the low-risk farms. Think about farms that are very well located, farms that don't have PRRS breaks very often. Think about a multiplier or a new farm that is very well located. They have a PRRS break every maybe 5 or 10 years, right? In that farm, because I don't see PRRS that often, my objective is elimination. So when I have a PRRS break, I want to eliminate the virus from that population. And I can do that in one of 2 ways. One is the population repopulation, and then the other one is herd closure, a long herd closure. We'll see how that works. The second group of farms is what we call medium risk. Farms that have a PRRS break every 2 to 5 years. And they still have good biosecurity, but they have PRRS breaks. In those farms, I don't want to eliminate completely the virus because I want to have immunity. So in those farms, I want to vaccinate after I control my PRRS virus. But I would like to wean PCR negative pigs. For those farms, I can do 2 things. One, I can do herd closure, again, get all the gills I can, get them exposed, and be sure that they stop shedding before I put new gills in. Or I can do gill acclimation. Be sure that my gills get exposed to live virus before they come in the farm, reduce the frequency of introduction of gills to my farm, and get those pigs in. And the last group is probably the more complicated, is farms that are at very high risk. They have a PRRS break every year or more, and it's very difficult to manage. So in that farm, I don't expect to eliminate the PRRS virus. I only expect to control it and to minimize the clinical signs of PRRS virus. For that, we have some tools. One of them is what we call batch farrowing, and you have maybe used that in some farms, is concentrating the breeding, the farrowing, and the weaning events of a farm in 1 week every 3, 4, or 5 weeks. And what that does, the main goal of that, is that you can have all in, all out in your farrowing room, in your nursery, in your finisher, or at least have less groups in your continuous flow nurseries and finishers. And that will take the infection pressure down. I think this is a very good tool that will help a lot producers in this region. In Spain right now, 25% of the farms that we visit, that we take care of, are doing some sort of batch farming. It has helped them a lot with high pathogenic PRRS virus. The second one is vaccine. In this case, I'm not too concerned in eliminating the virus, but I want to maximize immunity and minimize shedding. And for that, we do vaccination in the incoming gills, we do mass vaccination in the sows, and we do vaccination of the piglets to maximize immunity and minimize shedding. Now, keep in mind that this is a short-term plan. At some point, even in this farm that is at high risk, I need to try to stabilize the situation a little bit more. And for that, we can do what we call short herd closures. You now are not going to close a farm for 40 weeks, but you can probably skip an introduction of gills and have 16, 18, 24 weeks without entering new gills, allowing all the herd to get exposed, do a couple mass vaccinations to reduce the pressure of infection. Or if I have an external GDU or a GDU that is big enough, I can get my gills now every 12, 14, or 16 weeks and do acclimation for the virus that I have in the farm. So I can do some things with this farm to wean healthier pigs that will have maximum immunity and not many clinical signs. Let's take a look at the herd closure concept. This is a hypothetical population of 100 animals, and on day 0 or day 1, they got infected with one virus. The purple line is the number of the proportion of susceptible individuals. Over time, everybody gets infected in that population, and then you don't have more susceptible individuals. The blue line is the immune individuals, it's the opposite. As the pigs in one barn are getting infected, then everybody gets protected. And the red one is the interesting one, is the infectious curve. That's the proportion of individuals that are able to infect other pigs. In a closed population, most diseases that we work with at some point will do this, will eliminate themselves. If we take negative animals at week 10, for example, for this virus, they will not get infected, so we will eliminate the disease. But what happens in real life is that we get gills every 4, 6, 8 weeks into my farm. So I'm putting wood into the fire, always putting new wood into the fire every 4, 6, or 8 weeks. And this is what happens. We have recirculation of the virus all the time. We don't have enough time to stop shedding. And that's why every 4, 6, or 8 months, we have aborts again. Or the virus change a little bit, we have more clinical signs in the farrowing room or in the nursery. So that's what happens in reality. When you have farms that are in good locations or have good history of first breaks, what we can do is a herd closure. A herd closure works when you get an infection, you wait a few weeks to get all the gills that you can for your replacement. You fill your farm or an external GDU with gills, and then you let them get exposed with the field virus. After a few weeks, then you do 2 or 3 mass vaccinations, but you don't enter more gills, and you let the disease to die out. You start doing some processing fluid testing, and at some point, the red line is the proportion of weaned pigs that are PCR positive. So if we do everything right and we don't get more gills in, at some point, all the piglets are being born negative. And that's where you need to do intensive MAG-REBEL, biosecurity in your farrowing room. Minimize movement, take care of the people between rooms, wean the pigs at 23 days of age, no more than that. And with that, what you will do is stop transmission in the farrowing room and wean the last positive pig out of the door. This is herd closure. This is how it works. When you have the chance to do it, this is a strategy that helps a lot. And it's very consistent. If you do it well, 95% of the time, you will eliminate the virus from the farm. What is the problem? If I have a farm that is located in a high-dense region, it might get infected next year, and now I reduce my inventory and my quality is older, so that's a problem for me. Or if I need to produce a number of pigs per week in my packing plant and I have a commitment, I will reduce that number, so I have to be careful on which farms I implement it. These are 2 ways to measure if that works. One is time to stability, is the time that it takes a farm from the infection to the time that it's continuously working or eating negative pigs. And the other parameter that we use to measure if these strategies work is time to baseline production. And it's the time that it takes farms to get to what they were weaning before the disease. With those two parameters, you guys as an industry can start measuring what strategies work better for you. Batch farrowing, herd closure, gill acclimation, vaccine, no vaccine. And that way you will start answering the questions in your farms, in your regions, with your viruses. The last point that I want to make is, okay, we talk about reducing the number of new breaks with biosecurity. We talk about trying to stabilize my sows the best I can. But then the money, the losses, the biggest part of the losses are in the win to market days. That's where we need to do something about it. And for that we have two main tools, three. One is treatment. We can inject or medicate the pigs to minimize the secondary infections. Two, we can vaccinate them for PRRS to maximize immunity and minimize infection. Or three, we can do all in all out. And if my sow farm is stabilizing, all in all out is the most powerful tool that we have. But we can do that in every farm. So this is an idea for you. Well, these are some ideas on vaccination. Keep in mind that we need live vaccines to generate protective immunity. It's been demonstrated that kill vaccines don't generate protective immunity. Number one is that vaccine will help the clinical situation and reduce shedding, but it will not stop clinical signs. That's why we think that vaccines are one more tool of all this toolbox that we are discussing. Continuous flow. We said that we have to do all in all out. Continuous flow is bad. We all know it, right? Because the previous group of pig will infect my new group of pig with strep suis, with Drosera suis, with mycoplasma, with E. coli, with salmonella, everything, PRRS, influenza, will move from the previous group to the next group. So what we need to do is cut that cycle. So my clean pigs that come from the sow farm will have a chance to perform. You can do that in three ways. One is having big sow farms making a lot of piglets, so you have big finishers separated from the sow farm. Not easy. The second one, you can mix pigs from two different farms or 3 or 4 different farms. I am not brave enough to mix pigs from different farms. It's very dangerous, right? But some companies do. In Chile, I have a customer and client that does it very successfully, but they don't have PRRS. The number 3 that I was mentioning before is batch farrowing. So I want to share with you guys how that looks for us. In batch farrowing, we have, as I said, breeding, farrowing, and weaning concentrated. And this is an example of a 5-week batch farrowing. And you can tell how in batch farrowing you lose farrowings or liters per sow per year from 235 in a weekly production to 225 or 220 in 5-week batch farming. Yes, you lose some sows that will not fit into your net batch, so you reduce productivity because you have to breed only every 5 weeks. We increased a little bit the number of pigs weaned per sow from 13.1 to 13.7. That has to do with now I have a chance to clean and disinfect my farrowing room. I have less scours. I have less strep causing meningitis or causing arthritis. So I have less infection pressure in my groups, and I can do a better job with my best people on the 3 or 4 days that are critical for that piglet to survive. So that's why we reduce pre-weaning mortality. And the most dramatic, and the reason why we do it, is the reduction in mortality in the nursery. So you can see how we move from 8% to 4%. This is more than 50 farms of 3 different companies. And then in the finisher, we reduce mortality from 5% to 3%. So we are still doing that. We are expanding the number of farms that are doing that. There are pros and cons. Not every farm is for doing batch farrowing. I would say that 2,000 sows is the max that I feel comfortable doing batch farrowing, but there are companies doing batch farrowing in bigger farms. So that's a tool. Don't forget, keep in mind, we can share the summary of how to do it and all this. In conclusion, we know that this is difficult, and our producers always say, oh, this is too expensive, this is too difficult, but what we cannot expect is to produce better and cheaper with more disease. So at some point, we need to break the cycle and minimize infection pressure of those diseases to produce better and cheaper. The second one, keep in mind that PRRS is a long persistency disease that if we have continuous flow, will continue to change and modify and escape the immune system and will recirculate and cause disease again. Only 2 or 3% different, but you'll have some awards in that farm and bad performance in the nursery. Number 3, to prevent PRRS, we need to apply a program that is reducing the new breaks through biosecurity, including air filtration in some new farms that are in high-density regions, for example. 4, we need to stabilize the sows. Sometimes it's difficult, but the more stable farm sows that you have, the less PRRS you'll have in your nursery pigs, the lower the mortality. You cannot expect low mortality in nursery if your sows are unstable. That's where the virus is coming from. And finally, everything you can do to do all in, all out will help, not only for PRRS, but for all other diseases. And this is a discussion that goes beyond veterinary medicine, or beyond science, or beyond technical aspects. This is a financial discussion with your farmers, with your bosses, right? What options can I give to this farmer to break the continuous flow? Can they get partnered with another farm and separate production? Can we do a new farm in a different location and use this as a finishing farm? So my challenge to you guys is think outside of the box and look ways to help your farmers to do all in, all out. That will help them. With that, thank you very much for your time.
那我们谢谢Dr. Cano为我们带来这么精彩的演讲。那现